We hope the series will inspire international scholars, researchers, farmers, and business in the agricultural field, as well as the interested public. Now, let me introduce our speaker, Mrs. Josephine McChan, the founder of Homeland Green, established on the World Day to combat desertification in 2013. Homeland Green is a grassroots charitable organization based in Hong Kong, China, with the motto, "Be just to the earth, for the good of all beings." Mrs. Mack graduated from CHK, this university, 55 years ago, majoring in physics. Having retired after 41 years of experience in education, she ventures into the area of environmental protection with a focus in land restoration. Another speaker, Ms. Hilda Chan, much younger, is a member of Homeland Green and also a graduate from the same university, CHK, in the environmental science program, and has participated in the voluntary work in Inner Mongolia and local farms. For the past decade, they have witnessed through their participation and initiatives the paradigm shift in agriculture from exploitative to regenerative, based upon state-of-the-art scientific discoveries, utilizing ecological restoration while producing high-quality, nutrient-dense, pesticide-free produce. Okay, so without much ado, so let's welcome Mrs. Mack first, please.
Good afternoon, everybody. And may I first thank Professor Lam for this invitation and his kind words about our organization. We have long noted that land degradation is a worldwide phenomenon that aggravates climate change and threatens the world's food security. Through our involvement, we have come across the global effort of mitigating climate change with carbon sequestration and soil regeneration. So we formed partnership with the 4 per thousand initiative, Soil for Food Security, and climate launched by France and Regeneration International to learn from counterparts all over the world better ways to fulfill our mission. These international organizations provide platforms for experts and practitioners across the globe to share solutions for how we can transform our food and farming systems for better human, animal, and planetary health via a whole food systems approach to providing sufficient nutritious food for an expanding world population, while remaining within the safe operating space of all 9 planetary boundaries, while protecting wild and domestic animals and restoring soils, oceans, forests, and biodiversity. Through this decade-long journey of learning involvement in land and soil restoration work in northern China and locally in Hong Kong, we come to the realization that degraded land can be recovered and our food can be produced in healthier ways. We say this with confidence because we've witnessed it, we've experienced it, and we've done it. In the next 50 minutes or so, we're going to share what we have witnessed, experienced, done, and learned on this decade-long journey. The first story we're about to share is a miraculous recovery of Ulanbu Desert in Inner Mongolia, China. Ulanbu is the 8th largest desert in China. The total area is about 10,000 square kilometers. Located in the west bank of the Yellow River, it is under the administration of Bangkok, a county of the Bayanoa city in Inner Mongolia Autonomous Region. It is not a natural desert. 5 centuries ago, before the Ming Dynasty, it was once a rich, prosperous agricultural land. But population boom, warfare, land exploitation, and overgrazing eventually turned the once productive area into the endless sand dunes by the 1950s and 60s. Bengal County housed one of the 6 earliest desert control laboratories during the infant stage of a PLC, a period with insufficient scientific understanding nor resource to really deal with the continuous worsening of desertification. Even till the first decade of the 21st century, it was notorious for being the source of sandstorms that frequently scour northern China or periodically even southeastern Asia. Attempts to control the sands in the deserts began back in the 1950s. Those were the days when scientific research in desert restoration was not well established and the country was poor. Laying straw checkerboards was found to be the cheapest and most effective means to stabilize the migrating sand, to slow down the expansion of the deserts. Physically, the straw checkerboards work by slowing down the wind and reducing sand mobility. Biologically, after a few years, when straws decay and decompose, the aggregated residues become sand barriers. No irrigation is needed for the first step, but this is a very labor-intensive undertaking. This strategy is still widely used in all desert control projects over China, including Ulaanbaatar, even to date. Scientists also experimented with the various indigenous plants still in existence and tried to identify the most tenacious ones that can consolidate the effect and stand the challenge of time. Average annual precipitation in Ulaanbaatar is only 100 millimeter. Evaporation area is 70 times higher. This makes the environment too dry for any vegetation. Miles and miles of straw grid along the highway is a common sight after 50 years of neighbors' efforts. To consolidate the effect of the straw checkerboards, indigenous tenacious desert trees will be identified and then planted inside the grids to further stabilize the sand and protect newly planted shrubs from being uprooted by the wind and buried by dripping sand.
做成网格，然后种一些杂性植物，比如像花瓣呀、多索，用这些方式来固定这个流动下去。
前面这些是什么？
前面这个多索、花瓣、沙黄和一些沙土，这样的沙丘里一定半固定，咱们看到的植物的地方一定固定。
So this is a kind of sand stabilization strategies in the early days of the restoration of Ulaanbaatar. Saplings had to be replanted at least 3 times in the early days because of the frequent sandstorms and strong wind. This means years of effort and millions of investment were gone with the wind every now and then. When moving sand becomes more settled, the survival rate may go up to 60 to 80%. Pelicinon, indigenous in this part of Inner Mongolia, is known for its ability to survive drought. It has amazing vitality, a high survival rate, and low planting cost. Irrigation using drip line is only needed for the first 3 years in general. In other desert control projects in China, different plants will be chosen. Common Green can tell the first-hand story of Ulaanbaatar because for years we've been involved in voluntary hexasilon planting in the area. It became the miracle tree of Ulaanbaatar when it was discovered later that the growth of Cistantia deserticola, nicknamed desert ginseng, which has a symbiotic relationship with pelicinon, can be greatly enhanced by crafting it to the root of this miracle plant. At a later stage, entrepreneurs from nearby cities, attracted by this high economic value, came to invest. On the cultivation, it began to bring in some resources, which the poverty-stricken Dankou County desperately needed. Here, Homeland Green members share the joy of the harvest of this ginseng in the desert. Woodhouses were very common during those days of Homeland Green tree planting trips in the vicinity of Dankou. Sandstorms would strike any time during tree planting activities, and we have to take shelter to stay safe. These early efforts were only effective to a certain extent only. In no way they could slow down the encroachment of Ulan-Bu. By the 1970s, Dankou County was 85% desertified. Even the effort of manually building a windbreak and sand-fixing forest belt with a length of 154 kilometers and a width of 100 to 300 meters on the eastern edge of the Ulan Desert to protect the urban area of the county in the 1990s was not enough. Ecological immigrants became a common sight as many inhabitants lost their homes when the houses were buried by encroaching sand as the tree belt aged. Also gone were the livelihood, as they long failed to grow anything from their farmland. Resettlement villages with bare necessities were built in the outskirts of a county to accommodate these once peasants. So these are the resettlement areas we visited in 2014. More efforts needed, and things must move fast to save the county from disappearing entirely. At that time, it was unimaginable that what the open door policy of the country could bring in the coming decades. Beginning from the first decade of the 21st century, a huge project to recovery and regeneration was already under preparation, but it could only be implemented by phases. New measures were employed fast, and scientific organizations were called in to resolve some knotty problems, resulting in infrastructure quickly built, like the desert roads, power networks, and then communication systems. We actually witnessed the construction of a vernacular road prior to the laying of the asphalt surface, with measures to protect the road from being buried by sand. In late 2014, we rode safely and comfortably along this 44-kilometer Ulan-Bu Desert Road to our new plantation site. With the implementation of infrastructures and the desert road, productive land use began to appear. Here, the coordinator of the Dankou Farmers Co-op talked about his changing vision and hopes because of the infrastructure being built. We can see that biodiversity has been emphasized right from the beginning. Enterprises from outside of Dankou are also attracted by the special climate condition and policy that favors the growing of organic Chinese hemp, which is a crop and medicinal food commonly used by Chinese. So no chemical is to be used here, and the water is no water from the upstream of the river.
还有小花坏，这是属于长的能力。但是如果是水压树流速太小了，它这个
A lot of considerations were given on the choice of the right kind of trees to sustain the stability of this piece of hard-won land. Guided by the government zero pollution policy and the technical support by the academia, local family farms and small businesses began to make use of a specific climatic and geographical advantages to grow high-value crops. New industries also springing up. The landscape of Ulanbu began to take on different colors. And then in 2019, we have never thought that a big master plan of a circular economy can be realized. System thinking entrepreneurs brought in new technologies and concepts to create a circular economy. It enhances and sustains the momentum of recovery with the support of logistics and e-commerce. This is what we witnessed during our two planting trips in 2019, right in the heart of Ulanbu, where no one could tread before. It is interesting to note how farmers help with the operation of the solar panels, while at the same time benefit from them as electricity is provided for free for farmers. We can only say that the whole restoration and diversified ecological industry chain is a very complex system. Crops are cultivated under the solar panels. And then electricity is provided for free to the farmers. And then extra energy output supports the greater Yellow River area of aqua production and livestock industry. And then you produce a larger fruit system that enhances purification and filtration of water. It is a very complex system. This whole system is imported from the US. And then it solves the major problems often encountered in acre production. And then these are the submergent and emergent plants that help with the infiltration. Leading from the zero pollution dynamic fish farms are miles and miles of free-range poultry. Countless varieties along the way, and feeding whatever they find on land in the free-running waterways. Further down, capturing free solar energy are stretches and stretches of rice field, serving their important roles in filtration as well as food production. Of course, all the animal waste and farm waste will be recycled to produce compost and organic fertilizers, feeding the crop farms. Water and land produce a rewarding harvest for even visitors like us from afar. This is the first time we appreciate what a circular economy can bring. Networks roads built in Ulaanbaatar also made it possible for a zero-pollution eco-dairy farm to build 23 semi-free-range annual husbandries with own pastures, among other agronomical eco-farms in where once was the heart of Ulaanbaatar. This is the view from the lookout of the Shangmu High-Tech Farming Limited. Who can imagine that this was once nothing but running sand dunes? We also saw the development of green tourism. Exotic desert scenery, zero pollution farm dairy, visionary enterprises, ancient geological sites, adventurous trails, and then the government e-commerce office serves the purpose of helping enterprises promote their quality produce. In order to get a display corner at this service, the farm produce must be of good quality, and then follow all the policy of sustainable agriculture of the government. Logistics is so efficient now that all products from Dankao ordered through a e-platform can reach any place in China within 3 days. This is now the resettlement village of the poorest in the region, a far cry from the resettlement village we saw in 2014. Having involved in voluntary afforestation sites across northern China, we are convinced that large-scale ecological recovery that benefits both people and the planet is feasible when the sound science is put into practice. What we learned from the Ulaanbaatar experience is that the restoration of the Ulaanbaatar began some 45 years ago as part of China's Free North Shelter Belt program. We began to get involved with voluntary afforestation there some 10 years ago, and thus have the privilege to witness and record possibly the fastest progress of land restoration ever imagined within 6 years. But this could never be achieved without the concerted efforts of national policy, cross-disciplinary government officials, academia, small businesses, adventurous entrepreneurs, NGOs, and voluntary agencies, and the local people. What really bring about the changes are the advancement in scientific understanding of how nature works, and the related technologies put to effective use. Probably one of the most important scientific understanding is about the formation of soil and the origin of its fertility. Nowadays, we learn that it is a symbiotic relationship between photosynthetic plants and soil microbes since the appearance of a lichen on Earth, resulting in a building up of complex mineral-related soil organic carbon among eroded sand grains, which contain all the necessary minerals for life that provides habitats and energy for terrestrial life to flourish below and above ground and build up the topsoil. The ultimate source of energy for this process, of course, is the sun. With this understanding, it is not difficult to appreciate why the following land uses and farming practices are regarded as exploitative by their counterparts all over the world. Here are some examples. Overgrazing, plowing, and heavy tillage, leaving soil bare, etc., all have the effect of oxidizing the soil organic matter, destroying the habitats of soil microbes while continuously releasing CO2 to atmosphere. Excessive application of synthetic fertilizers cause salinization of our soil and runoff, polluting waterway. Pesticides and weedicides, besides their intended purpose, also destroy soil microbes and chelate useful soil minerals. Coupling with the practice of monocropping and planting annuals, seasonal crops in place of perennials, all added to the loss in biodiversity below and above ground. These practices, together with others, make the soil destruction process in most farmlands to overtake the natural soil breeding process. They do not destroy lives as directly as war, but could be in effect as deadly. And hence we have this worldwide land degradation phenomena as we see today. From the Ulambu story, it was affirmed that land uses going against these natural soil breeding processes would lead to soil degradation that will eventually lead to the collapse of a whole civilization. But the good news is that this process can be reversed. So we set off to see how this can be done in Hong Kong. Well, how? If the natural soil breeding process is a result of a symbiotic relationship between lives above and below ground, and the exploitative farming practices destroys the soil SOM and soil microbes, we just give up all these exploitative practices and do the opposite, putting biology and organic matter back into the soil, while at the same time increases below and above ground biodiversity. So practices like these, no-till or minimum disturbances, never leaving the soil bare, using mulching, companion and rotation planting, using more perennials, develop agroforestry to increase biodiversity, use of organic fertilizers or compost, and then incorporate livestock. In other words, increase biodiversity as far as possible, tend to be called regenerative, as they mimicry nature's soil building process. So we set up to see whether this can be done in Hong Kong. A few words about Hong Kong first. As for land use, the metropolis, we are at a metropolis with finance and property market being a major and land being the main major economy, and land scarcity to house a population of over 7.3 million. Over 95% of food is imported. The market share of a local farming community is less than 5%, including fisheries. Majority of the farms are vegetable and flower, with a few pigs and chickens farms. Because of public health concerns, no livestock or poultry production is allowed to be incorporated into vegetable farm. In terms of land use, our urban area occupies about 25.4%, while agricultural land only 4.1%. But not all of them are actively farmed. Only 14% of which is lower than 7 square kilometers in total, are actively farmed. The tertiary institutions in Hong Kong do not have agricultural or agronomy departments under a program until a program integrated agriculture and bioresource management was launched in recent years, admitting only a few dozen undergraduates. In general, it is difficult for farmers to get formal training or updated on forefront science knowledge, about the planting business. Most of the occasional workshops run by relevant government departments are ad hoc and skill-based. From an economic point of view, the sector in Hong Kong is insignificant. But from an ecological civilization point of view, we feel that it will be unfortunate that city dwellers in a metropolis are totally alienated from any natural food production. So a few words about the farming community in Hong Kong. As expected, farm sizes are small in general, and most are operated manually, with only occasional use of small machinery helping transportation and or irrigation. Rotational cropping is practiced by default, as many seasonal vegetables instead of perennials are grown to meet local market demands. It is common sight to see more than 10 types of crops being grown at any time in the same farm, ranging from leafy greens, including brassicas, to fruit-bearing ones. A few farmers may grow small number of indigenous fruit trees like papaya, banana, guava, longan, etc. among their seasonal crops. But as most farmers do not own the farmland, they are not allowed to grow trees, as landlords find them difficult to remove when they want to change the land use for better returns from the ever-booming property market. So agroforestry is almost out of the question for farmers in Hong Kong. A fringe effect is a total lack of dry plant materials to serve as mulching for most farms. A portion of the farming community choose to operate organic vegetable farms. These farmers may be more environmentally conscious or want to get a market share of the high-income consumers, as in general, organic produce is sold at a much higher price than produce from conventional farms. But higher market price of organic produce does not imply better living for the organic farmers, as they must operate within an organic certification framework, focusing on produce safety rather than produce quality. Under this framework, farmers are only allowed to use a limited list of organic fertilizers and pesticides, register under a regulatory body. It's worth noting that organic here in Hong Kong means only non-synthetic, but not the broad sense of the term that aims to improve soil health. Such fertilizers and pesticides are all imported because the local farming community is too small to support any local farming related facilities and or agrotechnological businesses. In terms of cultural practice, there is not much difference between the conventional and organic. Both can have the problem of excessive macronutrients but insufficient micronutrients. Pest-induced yield loss and use of pesticides are common sights, driving the production cost of organic produce even higher, not to speak of the concern for food safety. As for climate, Hong Kong is located on a coastal area with a subtropical climate. Because of our geological history, our soils are mostly sandy, high in oxidized iron, and low in soil organic matter. Instead of 4 distinctive seasons, we have a cooler and drier season of autumn-winter between November and April, characterized by very occasional frost on the one hand, but sudden temperature spikes as high as early summer on the other. The rest of the year is warm and rather hot, during which we can have days or weeks of fluctuations between warm and highly humid, thunderstorms with heavy downpours, very dry and hot baking sun, or cyclone days that can destroy everything above ground of the farms or leave the farms flooded. Nevertheless, because of market demand, farmers tend to grow seasonal crops throughout the year. The extra abiotic stress on crops and the soil ecosystem arising from this fluctuating weather can be rather challenging for farmers. So to see if the reverse of land degradation may work in Hong Kong, our first task was to find the best entry point to introduce science-based strategies of change to this farming community with little science background. We find a scientific understanding that plant exudates are released by the roots and all surfaces of the whole plant to varying degrees to attract fungi and bacteria, which then help plants source the needed nutrients and guard the plant roots from pathogens, a good entry point. It is not too difficult to explain to farmers that the action of fungi and bacteria feeding on these exudates attract protozoa, which feeds on fungi and bacteria, and in turn attracts predators like lentils and mites to come feed on the protozoa and fungi, and then attract other predators at higher trophic levels, with the result that nutrients are released as metabolic waste in forms that the plant roots can obtain. This usually is called the soil food web concept. And this process is called the exudate chain reaction in certain overseas farming circles. Farmers find the explanation convincing as they can really see the microbes in action under the microscope, which can be a first-time experience for many of them. They are given the understanding that feeding this way is critical for plants to achieve the highest levels of health and nutrition, as this is the way both above and below ground life evolve naturally. Our next step, of course, is to find the right farming partner to work with. We were lucky to locate a very experienced and open-minded organic farmer, nicknamed Chang Go, to house our experimental team in his Hongmiu farm. Chang Go is one of those pioneering organic farms who have been farming for over 50 years when we met. So in 2018, we began our first phase of experimenting generating farms in Hong Kong. Here is the story of the Hongmiu farm of Chang Go. Like his counterparts, things seemed to work fine at the beginning, but as years go by, Chang Go saw increasing pest-induced loss in yield, and financial deficit month after month began to accumulate. What makes Farmer Chang distinctly different from his counterparts is his refusal to use pesticides despite all the loss. He will only deal with the pest problems with physical means, as shown in the picture, sucking the insects with a diesel-driven vacuum pump, which, of course, will never be sufficiently effective and only adds to his daily toils, not to speak of the detrimental health effect as he keeps inhaling the exhaust gas from this diesel-driven vacuum pump. Between January and May 2019, Homeland Green ran the first experimental crop in the most unproductive section of the farm. Here is the process and the result. The far end of the sector of the farm was given to us to try out our experiment. So we did soil test, compaction test to get the baseline information. And we found that the compaction level was from medium to severe. And then advice was given to save farm waste for future mulching purpose. Mulching material was urgently needed as the first step, so we hauled in 10 tons of mushroom waste. And volunteers helped cover the experimental plots with mushroom waste. And they understood that the soil would be minimally disturbed from now on. We use compost tea and then introduce its use in many ways. As changing fungi and bacterial ratio takes time, we started with the living greens. And then also foliar spray was tried out. We share observations with Chang using simple instruments, and readings indicated that the automatic irrigation system needed adjustment. Initial rust infection of sweet chard was efficiently handled by appropriate foliar spray, and the subsequent health growth outcompeted the invading weeds. Heavy mulching proved effective with weed control, allowing corn to grow healthy and strong. Companion planting was also in the practice tried out. Here we have red spinach, celery, and Chinese parsley chosen to keep company with tomatoes. Performance of the plants were always under review, and observations were shared with Farmer Zheng and volunteers. The core group review meetings were also held outside of the farm occasionally. We also learned from Chang valuable planting skills for specific plants. Mulching became a common practice at the farm. And then within the same period, we also see a gradual improvement in Chang own plots. We leave Chang to decide what practices he likes to adopt. Worms were seen to come back after our first harvest. By around May, where the annual heavy downpour began, flooding was not yet serious, as the soil seems to have been improved slightly. We suggest Chang to use cover crops to improve soil health during the flooding season. By the time the first phase for experiments ended, we have already tried out all kinds of leafy greens and another fruit-bearing fruits like plants like tomatoes, cherries, with no pesticides, weeding, or tillage. Chang was suggested to plant more perennial cash crops to continue to improve the soil. But the field was revisited in March 2021. The wolfberry grew luxuriously, showing that our practices work. A second experimental site was done between August 2019 and March 2020. Here, Chang talked about the change he witnessed. He told the interviewers that his input is now lower, but his yield is not bad. There were really less weeds and no need for weeding frequently like before. There are still pest issues, but yield loss is much reduced. You can't expect it to be absolutely pest-free immediately. Chang again emphasized that absolutely I refuse to use any pesticide. The important thing is that if I found better and better, why should I use pests when I have such good yield? Heavy green crop is now a common sight of this farm, a far cry from what Homeland Green saw 2.5 years ago. And he was very happy about the improvement in yield. He talked about his story of losing money for the past 19 years. We were all amazed. How can you persist? And then he said, it is my passion. It is my passion to grow healthy crops. So I keep trying and trying. And last year was the first time he ever made profit. The important thing is that you can really achieve doing something in farming in Hong Kong. Well, not everybody is as lucky as Farmer Zheng, who doesn't need to support his family. The important thing is that we must work from the soil up. When the soil is good, only when it is good can you grow healthy crops. In April 2021, after collaborating with Zheng for 30 months, Zheng told interviewers the changes he saw in his farm and in his practices. It witnessed the result of regenerative farming, for example, the use of mulching. He used less in the past. Now he finds it very useful. He used really heavy mulching for his potatoes, and he found the potatoes grow real fast. He practiced companion planting, and he tried trying to find the best combination. And here are some of his examples. He even used bok choy as cash crop or as living roots to outcompete weeds. He grew cherry tomatoes together with zucchini. Organic farmer or conventional farmers knows that zucchini is very, very difficult to grow in Hong Kong, as they are easily destroyed by mildew. And we were very, very happy to see Zheng growing such beautiful and productive zucchini. And then his practice like, in the past, he may grow sweet potato leaves as cash crop, but now he may use it as living roots cover. In the home view experience, we mainly focus on working from the soil up. We know that now we have to start working from the plant down. Our experience in home view and feedback from Farmer Zheng were both encouraging. But of course, that was not enough. We must find ways to further cut down the cost, improve plant health to become more disease and insect resistant, to ensure that this momentum of change can be sustained. In the home view experience, we mainly focus on working from the soil up. We know that now we have to start working from the plant down. But first, we need to update our understanding of the nature of plant health, disease, and pest, and the relationship with plant nutrients before we can implement better nutritional management for our plants. We were deeply enlightened by the work of Dr. Don Huber and his colleagues, who have done more than 60 years of research on the subject. His mineral nutrient and plant disease has become one of our major sources of information and idea on plant nutritional management. The subject is complex. We were given the understanding that all essential nutrients, no matter macro, micro, or trace, will influence the incidence or severity of some diseases. The complexity is that a particular element may decrease the severity of some diseases, but increase others, and some will have opposite effects under different conditions. The volume of knowledge to digest is massive, but the gist is that nutrition influences all the interacting components affecting disease susceptibility and severity, and the detrimental effect of nutrient imbalance to plant growth and disease resistance is tantamount to deficiency. The concept of nutrient imbalance was a mind blower for us, as that gives us a sound and simple explanation to why crops are so disease prone, whether grown with conventional chemical or the restricted organic fertilizers in Hong Kong, which both emphasize only on NPK. Even more complex is not only that different crops have a different balance of macro, micro, and trace minerals at different stages of the life cycle, but the predominant form and biological stability of nutrient that is applied or available is of equal importance. But we were really perplexed by these new understandings. We were lucky to come across the work of two leading figures in the world of regenerative farming. The first one is Dr. Olivier Hassan, who has done extensive work and research in both temperate and tropical soils. His work has enlightened us about the limitations of the aerobes in our thermophilic compost, as he points out that facultative PGPM are those that bring about the best redox potential and pH of soil, which may go in accordance with optimum plant physiological conditions and provide all nutrients in a readily available form with a low risk of mineral toxicity. So that began our journey of seeking the help of facultative plant growth promoting mechanism. And then the idea of a plant health pyramid conceptualized by John Kemp of Advancing Eco-Agriculture helps connect the dots for us to figure out a practical approach for our second phase of implementation. The idea of the plant health pyramid was based upon the concept of trophobiosis, which was initiated by the French agronomist Francis Chapuchot early in the 20th century. Its foundation on the premises that insects and disease pests cannot utilize complete proteins and carbohydrates as a food source. John Kemp, through intense study and the knowledge gleaned from many industry leaders and his extensive field experimentation, has formulated the concept that the degree of plant health and immunity is based on plants' ability to form structurally complex, complete compounds, like the carbohydrates, the proteins, fats, lipids, oils, and plant secondary metabolites. Through his farm-based research, he identified the kind of resistance to disease and insects that plants develop as the health level reaching different stages, and the specific macro, micro, and trace minerals required for each stage. He also arouses farmers' awareness about the relative energy efficiency of the different chemical or biological forms of a nutrient. For example, whether they are oxidized or reduced, whether they are biological chelated, to help farmers make more cost-effective decisions. He asserts that healthy plants can become completely resistant to disease and insects, provided that nutrient integrity can be maintained throughout the life cycle of the plants. He proves his assertions through his consultancy work, and his concept is now incorporated into the USDA and LCS guidelines to farmers. So, armed with these new understandings and concepts, we were ready to begin the second stage of our journey to regenerative farms in Hong Kong. And then, in addition to Farmer Germ, we found ourselves another partner to work with. The information provided helps greatly in refining our nutritional management strategies particularly on the preparation of a variety of homemade, carbon-rich, bioactive microbial liquids to cater for the needs of different microbes at different stages of their life cycle. So this is the new partner we found, Farmer Eva. So here is the story. Eva's farm is a family-owned semi-commercial farm with high biodiversity. This 0.56 hectare of land had been a conventional farm for 20 years and then left uncultivated before Eva inherited from her parents 2 decades ago. Only part of the land is used to grow seasonal vegetables, but the rest is dedicated to ecological and fruit trees, perennial shrubs, flowers, and herbs. Vegetable plots are scattered in different areas, and some are rented to neighbors. This gives us the convenience that the performance of Eva's crop can always be compared with those planted by her neighbors. Eva used a mixture of organic fertilizers and homemade enzymatic liquids for her vegetables, and despite the occasional pest-induced yield loss, it refused to use any pesticides, chemical, or organic like Changor. Actually, this is one of the prerequisites Homeland Green set for partnering farmers. I mean, if farmers are ready to use pesticides, we won't consider them as good working partner to try out our experiments. In 2019, Eva heard about the use of compost and began to try out on her own with waste collected from nearby vegetarian restaurant and farm waste. She attended a Homeland Green workshop on composting and regenerative farmer in January 2020 and reached out for more support. So if you look at the perennial shrubs and trees and fruit trees, it looks great on one hand. But when you look at the soil for growing vegetables, it is sandy and compacted soil with not much organic matter, typical of most farms we visited. And the vegetables weak and unhealthy as a result. So the first thing we have to do will be set the stage to get started. Briefing sessions will run. Eva, the farmer, and enthusiasts who may come to learn, experiment together. Early lessons were about plant observations and collection of baseline data about the soil condition and the existing plants that are comprehensible to practitioners with little soil background. Concepts like the importance of nutritional balance of plants and the detrimental effect of mineral deficiency and excess were introduced and measured using handheld leaf sap meters. Handy instruments like the microbiometer, which gives relative data about the quantity of soil microbial biomass and fungi to bacteria ratio, help also arouse their interest. Soil compaction level, as measured by a penetrometer, and its relationship with soil structure and water filtration were also introduced right at the beginning to help practitioners start thinking about soil health. Baseline data after collection of baseline data about the soil, the first step we want to do would be developing the habit of making and using proper thermophilic compost. This is the compost Eva used to make with her neighboring farmers. In general, the public have the understanding that you just put all the natural waste in a place and let time do the job without any quality assurance. Then for us, we introduced her to the proper way of using thermophilic compost that temperatures have to measure, that the pile has to be turned after temperature reaching certain degree for sufficient duration of time. And then the quality of the compost is monitored through microscopy. So eventually, Eva developed this habit of building piles almost every week, or as long as sufficient amount of waste is collected. And then the importance of getting soil always covered was emphasized. Dry leaves, tree cuttings, and grass clippings were saved or collected. Mushroom substrates were brought in to serve as mulching. And then from then on, no soil is to be left bare. Within months, the effect of compost with mulching looked obvious to the farmers. And farmers became more and more confident of new approaches when different crops were tried out in the subsequent months. In winter 2021, visiting farmers and friends of Eva became really convinced that regenerative farming is the right way. When they saw and weighed Eva's cabbage compared with cabbage on adjacent plot planted by Eva's neighbor, they all wonder how come the insects like to feed on her neighbor's cabbages, but not on Eva's. To address the issue of nutrient balance, Eva was introduced to the idea of compost tea and homemade bio-liquid fertilizer to take care of the plant's need for macro, micros, and trace minerals. So here we make fish hydrolysate, and then we will use grounded eggshell and put it into the compost piles, and so that calcium oxalate can be formed on the surface of the fungi, and then when they are digested by protozoa and other predators, that the calcium will be released in a plant available form. And then there are all kinds of carbon-rich bioactive fertilizers, all homemade with waste. Sprouting rate was occasionally used in assessment of these homemade products. And then we also try out the effect of foliar spray made with these bioactive liquids. Farmers were also introduced to the use of bricks reading, which correlates to a certain degree the photosynthetic efficiency of plants as a precarious way to assess the effectiveness of various measures. Bricks readings were in general rather low in the early days of experimentation. To further improve plants' performance, Eva and volunteers were introduced to more refined nutritional management strategies that address the nutrient needs of plants at different stages of a plant's life cycle. They were trained to be more alert of the possible sign of nutrient excess or deficiency so that related issues can be resolved in a timely manner. More varieties of ingredients that may help provide essential micro and trace minerals were sourced to produce different kinds of homemade, carbon-rich, bioactive micro amendments to cater for different needs. The next summer, Eva found her eggplant bear abundant, long, big, firm, shiny fruits she had never seen before. The leaves were intact throughout the whole plant, and flowers kept blooming even during fruit fill. Eva experienced a long harvest period she never had before. In 2022, Eva demonstrated to visitors how deep the penetrometer could go in different plots, where new farming strategies have been implemented to different degrees. You can see that the penetrometer can go all the way in the earliest plots, okay? And then it goes more or less half the way in the plots with several harvests. And then for plots not yet started, not too much about, okay? So the penetrometer can go only a few inches. Soil samples were also collected from the experimental plots to compare the visual change in soil structure before new farming strategies were implemented. So this is a soil sample collected before the experimentation, and this is the soil sample after the experimentation. Okay, so farmer Eva and volunteers were guided to show the change in color, texture, formation of aggregates, etc. In summer 2023, Eva shared the observations of the crops with visitors on her cucumbers. Eva never saw her melons grow so quickly and so big before. And then on a hairy melon, these are not hairy melon, they are winter melons. And on her bitter melons, even more surprising is the response of the melons to fruit flies. And this is the first time he saw a kind of white powder going on the skin of the bitter melons, which actually is a production of secondary metabolites, which helps the melons to be resistant to pests. And then on her winter melons, he suddenly noticed that this winter melon climbed onto the long end tree. And then even without nets, they were not stung by the fruit flies. And it becomes really heavy. She was very, very happy that all her melons are really heavy this year and that no yield loss due to pests or insects. So after 30 months of learning and experimentation in Eva's farm, with no pesticide, no insecticides, weedicides were used, no weeding, nor tillage except shallow till for transplanting. Soil was always covered by living roots or mulch. It was learned that growing healthy crops and improving soil work hand in hand, results in lower cost, higher yield, and better satisfaction. Hence, we have to work both from the soil up, improving soil structure, improving soil organic matter, and then of course, always get the soil protected. And then from the plants down through proper nutritional management. One thing is for sure, Eva will never go back to the way she farmed before. So this is a decade-long road of learning and experimenting. We know that this is only a small step towards our vision and recognize the limitations in our knowledge and of our resources. However, we are convinced that this is the right way to go. We are delighted to have a chance to share our experience and learning with the community interested in the science and practice of regenerative farming. We hope this will be yet another step to arouse the awareness of consumers for healthier food, healthier soil, and a healthier earth. Thank you, and we welcome any feedback, comments, and questions.
Thank you very much. Okay, so who would like to ask question? You can raise your hand or you unmute yourself and talk. Yes, I saw someone raising the hand. So, Wendy.
Yes, I have a question. Now, during the transformation, during the participations of the farmers during the transitions, do they still experience any type of difficulties like cultural practices, reluctance to forego the practice, or do they get discouraged when they don't see the effect in a short period of time and go back to the old practice?
I think for all the collaborative farmers, they knew from the very beginning that it takes time. All right. And so, but throughout most of the process, they only see improvement. Okay. And then different farmers may need different duration of time to adopt all the cultural practices. But as long as they can see improvement, I've never come across any farmers that regret or would decide to go back to their original practices.
Okay, so it seems like the farmers, when they see the benefits, they will continue, right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Because the benefits is for real. I mean, who would argue for lower input, higher yield, better consumers' satisfaction? And then also for the consumers who really have tasted that food, they can tell the difference between these and those bought from the markets. And so the farmers themselves, they're not totally money-oriented in the sense that they were happy that they can produce real quality food. And then I think it is to their satisfaction. This is the mission and vision of the farmers to always produce healthy food for themselves and consumers. So that's what's bringing the satisfaction. I think not only in the financial gain.
All right.
No, I totally agree. If they allow themselves, if they have patience, sometimes I think a lot of farmers in Hong Kong difficulties is when they switch, is that, they want to see effects right away, but this kind of regenerative farming, they need to bear in mind that it takes time. And it's not like a factory that you can go in and put in some chemicals and it will change overnight, but it will take time for, it's a community of microbes. It's a community of living organisms in the soil and the plant itself. So it will take time for them to change. And just hope that they don't discourage when they don't see effects right away, like right next week or right next month.
Thank you, Wendy. So, Sandra, do you have a question?
Hello, thank you so much for the wonderful talk. It's really heartening to see that regenerative farming is not only implemented in China, but also actually in Hong Kong as well. So thank you. I have many questions actually, but I'll keep it short. For the first one, addressing the China case study, that is, I wonder where does the water come from that is going from an extremely deserted area that even hardy trees can barely survive to being able to produce agriculture? So I'm just wondering, So has the reforestation changed the local microclimate so much that it increased precipitation so that it enables industries even as water demanding as agriculture? So yeah, I think I'll ask this first question first. Thank you.
Yeah, this is actually what we witnessed. I mean, not only in Ulanbu. Now, Ulanbu is a very distinct area in a sense that because the Yellow River is right by this side. But like what you said, afforestation, I mean, successful afforestation really bring change in the climate. In other area, where there once were running river, but it was totally dry up, after afforestation, we can see the streams coming back. And then the mini-climate there is changed in a sense, for better or worse, because some of the original desert plants fail to grow anymore because the land has been, because of the climate change. And so they are more adaptable to crops farming rather than the original indigenous desert plants. So this is really what we witnessed.
Yeah, so let me supplement a bit to that. So deserts does not mean that they don't have water at all. Yeah. So first, there are underground waters in many of the deserts. And second, there are also condensation during the morning. So the thing is how to contain those water so that it can be used multiple times before the moisture getting blown away by the wind. So in the desert, without organic matters, without any vegetations, so any moisture during the daytime get evaporated and blown away fast, so they cannot be reused. So most of the reconstruction of deserts start with increasing the surface area for condensation so that they trap all the possible moisture back to the soil. With any kinds of vegetation or microbes, they will have organic matters and retain the water better. And after successions, if they go to shrubs and then trees have a very high power of maintaining moisture because the evapotranspiration system can keep the water going multiple rounds before they lost. So that's very important at the end of the cycle to build some trees in the area to totally regenerate the desert into something more useful. So as Mrs. Mac has shown, so there's a lot of device at the beginning is to trap the condensation and moisture in the deserts. I think that's some technical supplementations to the observation.
I remember talking to some local residents and farmers there. At the first stage, after we plant the trees, actually they need to use a little bit of groundwater. So they use drip irrigation to help the plant survive first. But then after the plantation has established and the area is big enough, then they are bringing back some rain to the region. And a local resident shared with me that the annual precipitation becomes over 300 millimeter. So it's quite impressive.
Yeah, so for the trees to grow laterally, it requires 500 millimeters annual precipitation. So at the beginning, before you have any trees, right, so you need to get some water first. So there are two major sources of water for growing trees. If it's a river nearby, this can channel some of these river waters using dripping system to grow the tree, right? With understanding that in the future, those forests will help to maintain the rainfall. And the second is from underground. But how can you get it from underground? Usually, if this is a snow mountain, like glacier mountain nearby, the glacier in the wintertime, they always have some water go down and then fill up the underground water. So that's why the global warming is so challenging to the desert, because if the glacier get disappeared, then the underground water will drop, and then you cannot get enough water to grow anything you want to rebuild the forests. So there are all the things are interconnected. Yeah. Okay, Sandra, I think you have a second question, right? Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. And this question is for Hong Kong. So, actually, I have a few questions for your projects in Hong Kong. That is, right now, what is the scale of collaboration of Homeland Green with local farmers? So you've mentioned 2 case studies, Mr. Zhang and also Eva. So how many partner farmers are you guys currently working with? And if we personally, if there are some farmers who are interested in collaborating with you or learning from you, how should they reach out, or how can we help connect you with the farmers? Thank you.
I must say that I welcome very much this question. You know, like what we said at the beginning, Homeland Green is a very, very tiny organization, okay? We only have a handful of volunteers with no resources and so on. And so that is the reason why we started small, okay, locating one farmer and then another one. But then we were very fortunate to have an NGO from the US coming to develop the idea in Asia. And the name of the NGO is Zero Footprint Asia, okay? So we enter partnership with them, and they try to raise funds through the food industry to support regenerative farming, which helps to mitigate climate change. Okay, so their emphasis is on increasing soil organic matter to mitigate climate change, whereas we have a slightly broader objectives. Besides improving soil, we want to grow healthier plants, which will also be welcomed by the food industry and customers. Okay, so beginning last year, with their support, they have set up this Restore Fund open for application to all farmers in Hong Kong. And so last year we had 5 collaborating farms, and the application for next year is still open, right? So you're welcome to encourage any farmers in Hong Kong to continue to apply. But then we will soon enter into our selection process.
I think we just entered that process, but if you know anyone interested, please let us know. We'll connect the farmers to Zero Footprint Asia for sure.
Yeah.
And I think the results for the next round will come out in early September. So, but even if you're not in the Restore Fund, we can still connect and then see what we can do. So just let us know.
Okay, good.
And about the scale, we forgot to answer. I think from the first round of 5 farms, there are 3 of them are the larger production farm that sell vegetables in the market. So like Cherngo, his farm is about 10,000 square feet around, yeah. And then another one is called Chamsan, is also around 10,000 square feet. And the third one is Eva's farm, also around the same size, I guess, but less smaller area for vegetable production, more on the fruit tree. So these are the 3 major farms we're working with. And the other 2 are more like a garden scale. So they are for their own consumption or for some enthusiasts, but they are also very interesting farms. And they're doing composting and all the mulching and using all the organic materials to farm better.
Okay, thanks, Hilda.
Thank you so much. I want to follow up with one more question. Sorry. That is, since right now, I think Hong Kong government is constructing that. Sorry if I don't know the English term for that, but it's 農業園. And these current projects, they're trying to promote farming and to boost our local production. But then at least even with the first phase of the project, it has been accused of not actually not actually respecting the right and the knowledge of local farmers, such as paving concrete on agricultural land and then putting agricultural soil on top of it, which is defeating its purpose, etc. And looking at the sample of the Chinese government, that is, they promote the collaboration between. Sorry.
Continue, please. Yeah, there's some noise from other.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Continue.
Yeah. Well, the Chinese government, they promote the collaborations between experts, farmers, and like the different researchers, etc. So in that case, has the Hong Kong government or the agents ever reached out to NGOs like you for advice? And also, and if that has not been the case, will you ever consider reaching out to the government to actually, to establish partnership so that the new projects can actually start from, as you said, the soil up at a much larger scale? Thank you.
It's a difficult question for me or for us. I think the farming community is looked after by the Fisheries and Agricultural Department of the Hong Kong government, okay? And then our understanding is that their concept of organic farming, like what I said at the outset, for us is a rather narrow sense of the word organic. Okay, not focusing on improvement of soil health. In a sense that we have disseminated our information about our practices and experiences through our Facebook, through our website, and then also running workshops and talks with a lot of the NGO organizations and so on, okay, trying to get more people convinced of a more scientific approach to our farming. But then, maybe because farming is not an important or sector of our economy, so we were never approached by anybody from the government side. On the other hand, I think we are very, very open. I mean, whenever we get invited, and no matter how big or small the community, as long as we can squeeze the time, and then as long as we get the audience, we are always ready to share, from the science we know, from our experiences, and then all the partnering farmers are actually open. For those workshops I ran before, when the participants are interested in seeing the real action, then we make arrangement for them to visit our partnering farms. And then also the farmers will share with them their experience of this transition and why they find it hopeful, why they think that this is the right way to go, and so on. But anyway, we are a very small organization, and we'll try to do as much as we can.
So let me supplement to that. So in the sense of government regulation, I think they're looking for standards. So organic farm has international standards, and I believe that the Hong Kong organic farm standard is following the international standard, but not exactly registered yet. So if there are standards, then they can issue certification whether some farms are following the practice. I think that's why the government is focusing on that. So if the regenerative farming has a standard, then we can advocate what kind of standards you're looking for, right? And also, it's more, another question is about the scientific base of this regenerative farming is still quite unknown. So it's just, I saw a question in the chat box. So for example, right? So what's changed in the soil? You see a better growth, but what kind of changes? Is the microbes change or the nutrient change? Is the change consistent from one area to another? Right. So I think those are the questions, scientific questions together with some kind of a standard will be important to bring this regenerative farming to a higher level so that the policymaker will pay better attention. That's my suggestion. So do you want to answer this question, or do you know what kind of microbes and chemical substances has been added after the practice of regenerative farming? This is a question.
I think the most obvious, or the one indicator that we want to measure the most is definitely soil organic carbon, because we emphasize the use of many different organic materials like the spent mushroom substrates and some mulching material, or even the living roots mulch. That means planting very dense crops over a field. And all these are actually adding carbon to the soil. And if these carbon are really digested by the microbes and boost their growth, then it is expected that the soil will have a higher level of soil organic carbon. And that means the carbon is stabilized in the soil. And this carbon is not only the energy source of some soil life, they also improve the soil structure by acting like a glue that build the soil structure. So this is the most key things that we want to see improved, or to test them if we have the chance.
I guess organic carbon is one, right? But there are more than that, right?
Yes.
Micronutrients, right? So biodiversity in the soil, right? So nutrient recycling in the soil, right? So I think there are many scientific questions behind. So yeah, so our colleagues has been helping you.
Yes.
So we hope that we have more scientific evidence, more quantifiable standard measurements can be done, and it's easier for formulating a policy. So it still needs some works, but it should be an international collaboration than just a single NGO in Hong Kong. So I think in the future we should ask more regenerative farming from the international community to share the experience and try to see whether we can come up with a standardized protocol. And then people can follow easily, rather than everyone has their own practice, and then for the government, they don't know which one to follow, right? So, but that's my suggestion. So I guess that, yes.
Just a few words. I mean, actually, this is the reason why we joined those international platforms, okay? Because in a sense, the regenerative farming movement we call it a movement. It's relatively new. Maybe developed within this this decade or so. But then on these international platforms, there are lots and lots of scientists and practitioners all spread all over the globe. And then we saw this development of looking for soil health indicators. And actually, I think we are very lucky and fortunate to have the support of Professor Lam's colleagues and helping us to develop certain kind of soil test, okay? But then at the beginning, we can only choose a very few limited parameters. And we hope that they are the most important parameters, while keeping an eye on the international scene to see the development. I mean, after all, we are practitioners, we're not scientists, but we are user of scientific knowledge.
Yeah, so I think in the audience, there may be people running farms who would like to join your efforts, and there are also some scientists. I think Sandra is the one who also working on soil microbes. So there's a lot of crossover amongst this group. Yeah, I guess the time is getting late, so I need to call for a stop here. So we'll have more discussion later. So the talk in August will be announced later. Yeah, so thank you everyone for joining us, and thanks to speakers again, and we'll see you later. Okay, bye-bye everyone.